was young. I remember having these chemistry sets, and I'd like to mix chemicals and see colors change, and I had a microscope set, and I think those aroused my curiosity and interest. There was a part of me that just wanted to do something that was important, and if you don't ask something important, you won't do something important. Those were some elements that made me want to do what I do now. My name is Bob Langer, and I'm a professor of chemical and biomedical engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The type of things that I do cover a number of areas. First, I'm a teacher. I teach undergraduates at MIT, and I have a large lab of about 60 people. We're training and doing PhD theses and postdoctoral work. When I started out, I really didn't have a clear idea of the direction my career would go. I think over time what I would see is that to solve some of the problems I was interested in solving would take an understanding of different disciplines. And so my feeling is I'd do whatever it takes to solve those problems. So if it were different disciplines that were important, I'd learn them or I'd find people who could help. And I have experts with degrees in molecular biology and cell biology on the one hand. I have a number of chemists, PhD chemists, PhD chemical engineers, PhD electrical engineers, physicists. I've got pharmaceutical scientists working in the lab, a number of clinicians, material scientists. So we probably have about 10 different disciplines represented. And I think it's a team effort. I might come up with the very general ideas, and some of the postdocs or graduate students will, figure out how to make it happen. We're working on a variety of things. We're working in the area of nanotechnology and microfabrication. For example, we've been developing new microchips that could have little nanowells in them, maybe hundreds of nanowells on them, that could literally ultimately create a pharmacy on a chip that someone might swallow or have an implant that could, you could either control the drug levels by remote control or maybe someday put a biosensor in to deliver the drugs in response to a specific signal in the body. We're looking at approaches like ultrasound, using techniques so that you can say, for example, if somebody needed an injection, you wouldn't have to puncture the skin. Or similarly, if you needed to draw blood, you wouldn't have to puncture the skin. We've also been working on new cell biology areas like stem cell biology to see if we can learn how to change stem cells into other types of cells like blood vessel cells. And we've been working on new ways of delivering genes to patients. Another set of advances that we started working on was this whole idea of taking synthetic polymers and combining them with cells to hopefully make virtually any tissue or organ.
You can liken Bob to a conductor of a great symphony. So if you close your eyes, it's a single harmonious sound which emanates from all these spectacular technicians. The strength of his personality, that which he does by fostering the careers of young people, the brilliance of his insight invites the very best players to come and sit in his symphony.
For the most part, before we were involved, chemical engineering involved a lot of theoretical work, a lot of modeling. And one of the things that I became interested in was, could we make things? Could we see medical problems, and could we come up with inventions that might solve them? The materials that are used in medicine, generally the driving force for these were often clinicians who were trying to solve a medical problem. And what they would often do is they would kind of take a polymer you might find in your house, but that somehow resembled the organ or tissue you're trying to fix, and they'd use it in a human being. So if you look at today the materials that are used in an artificial heart, those are materials that were originally used in a lady's girdle because they have a good flex life. So first I had an idea that we could get much better controlled drug delivery if we could make polymers dissolve in a very controlled way, kind of like the way a bar of soap dissolves. It wasn't thought that you could release molecules that were large in molecular weight. And I became interested in seeing if we could create materials that could do that. And myself and some of my students worked out some chemistry that enabled us to do this. But not only that by changing the polymer chemistry, we could very easily make it dissolve anywhere from a day to maybe 6 years or any time in between. Then one of my friends, who's a neurosurgeon, Henry Brem, now he's chief of neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins, came to see me because he wanted to have better ways of treating brain cancer. The side effects of cancer chemotherapy are terrible. I mean, it's, sometimes a fine line between killing the tumor and killing the patient. And he asked, could we help him? And the type of thing that he was thinking about is, could we do local delivery? Could we design materials that could locally deliver a drug to the tumor for, say, a period of a month or so? So the whole idea of delivering the drug locally could theoretically give you two advantages. Advantage one is you get much less side effects because you're delivering it locally to the target rather than throughout the whole body, so you don't get, these really bad side effects. Second thing is that it might be more effective because you're delivering it very high concentrations locally. Basically, what happens with our projects is we have a hypothesis, a theory, and students try to think of experiments that'll prove those theories. Maybe sometimes it involves making something, and so we might try to create something or invent something. And what happens is sometimes you go several weeks and you're not successful, but all of a sudden you hit upon a solution and you are successful. And that's often how it works. The lab is very active in patenting, and a lot of what we do at MIT is discovery, is new findings, new principles. We have approximately 380 patents that are either issued or pending. We're also very active in publishing. We probably have about 700 scientific articles as well. So I think the goal of the papers is to disseminate the knowledge to the world. The goal of the patents is to ultimately provide incentives for companies to develop these things so that they'll be useful for people.
What attracted me to Bob had nothing to do with what I was working on or what he was working on, but it was clear to me then that this was a very dynamic person who I could learn a lot from. And Bob Langer was not Bob Langer. He was a young professor at MIT. He gave a talk in 1978 in this huge amphitheater, and there were very few people there. And I went down to him afterwards and told him that I was interested in some segment of what he was talking about, and he said, why don't you come by and talk to me? And it was clear that we had some mutual interest, and I became his second graduate student. He was someone who I thought that even as a young person that I really wanted to be my mentor for the next 5 years. I didn't realize it would be mentor for life. I am not Bob, not first because I don't have Bob's skills and talents, but also because what Bob wants people to do is not be him. He's not trying to clone him. What he wants people to do is take their own talents and bring it above and beyond where they might have been had they not been exposed to him.
It's very important to me that the people who come through our lab get a good experience and that they go out to be leaders. And that could take the form that they might become a professor at a university. And, I'm very proud of the fact that we've got about 80 people who have graduated from our lab who are professors at other universities, training others who are in these areas. So one of the things that you want to do is build people's confidence, to train them, also to get them to start thinking bigger, to try to answer big questions.
Bob always encouraged me to think about what are the fundamental processes that are making that patient sick, to come to the heart of a problem, to identify the heart of the problem, and if you understand it and you can grasp the fundamental mechanisms, then you can propose new solutions. If you add up diseases 2 through 10, they don't compare to the ravages of atherosclerosis. We're talking about myocardial infarction, a heart attack which strikes well over 1 million people each year, half of whom will die before they make it to the hospital. And in the world, we're talking about death rates of about 50 million people per year. With someone who has or an impending heart attack, we can try to restore the health without having to structurally entirely repair the arterial system.
His vitals on presentation when he got to the floor, he was 82, 150.
There's an endovascular stent, one of the stents, in fact, that we studied and have published on. This particular form of a gold-coated stent is extremely biocompatible. Stents are these small mesh-like devices that are put in arteries. We were of the first who were lucky enough to start working in this field. Now there are over 1 million stents placed in the United States, 1 million stents outside the United States. All of these people before would have needed bypass surgery. It was through Bob that I understood how to approach clinically important processes and to delve into the fundamental mechanisms using technology, harnessing technology in a rigorous and scientific way to really unlock the disease processes on the one hand, and on the other to propose potential ways of treating them.
I think I was driven by the fact that when I started doing my postdoctoral work in 1974 in a hospital, and I could see that if we could do some things that it might help patients, and that's what I want to do. I want to see the things we do have a real impact on the world.
It's probably safe to say that there isn't a patient today in a hospital or a physician who takes care of patients who aren't making use of a technology or a thought process that didn't emanate from Bob or his laboratory. That's a very bold statement, but I firmly believe it to be true.
I ended up in Bob's lab because I answered an advertisement in the back of Science. It was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. It definitely is like a whole train station. I mean, it's Grand Central Station for research in polymer science and engineering and biology and medicine. I came right fresh out of my PhD to work on this tissue engineering problem. So I really started in the field of tissue engineering in Bob's lab. This is Jennifer Cochran. She's a postdoc. Jennifer had a lot of experience in her thesis making things in E. coli, and now she's in a lab that's an expert at making things in yeast. And so what Bob did is, as the project started to take off, he kind of had an idea of what people in his lab sort of need to know and who they needed to know. He would make connections between people.
Finally got tracing gels.
Just kind of talk about the technical details about. It was just an amazing time because I learned so much about several different fields by being in his lab.
I don't know if there's just a single goal or a single holy grail of tissue engineering. I think ultimately what you'd like to be able to do is have enough knowledge, enough understanding so that you could make whatever replacement part you want, whether that be a new skin, new cartilage, new tendon, or a new organ like a liver or pancreas.
Liver transplantation took off in the 80s, and as it became more and more widely practiced throughout the United States, there were more physicians who could do the transplants, but just simply not enough livers to go around. And at that time, there was an increase in hepatitis C. So, there was a tremendous need clinically.
Jay Vacanti and I were friends, have been friends for many years, starting in around 1977. And in the early 80s, he came to see me. He, at that time, was a liver transplant surgeon, would see children die of liver disease. And he asked, could we come up with better ways of doing that, maybe by taking cells and transplanting them. So he asked me, could we come up with polymers that you could put the cells on to encourage their growth?
Physicians like Dr. Vacanti could see that, well, my God, liver regenerates on its own in the body, because there are many clinical situations where a very large part of liver is resected or cut out of patients, and the liver grows back in a matter of a couple of months completely. And so there's this enormous regenerative capacity of the liver that the clinicians knew about, and why can't we harness that to treat our patients? Why can't we take some donor cells, not a whole liver, use one liver for hundreds of patients, or take some material, a biopsy from a living donor, and use that? But the thing that stood in their way was the technology to do something with those cells. So what the field of tissue engineering really needed was materials and devices that could get those cells to grow into the appropriate three-dimensional structures. And so it was actually a very fun time, because I got to learn a lot about the field of polymers and scaffolds for tissue engineering from Bob, and then bring a lot of things together to start to solve these problems.
When we first started doing really any of these problems, there was huge skepticism. People would say before we started doing them that they couldn't be done. And even after we did them, a lot of people were very skeptical and didn't believe it.
We're going to go into the tissue culture room. Can we come in? I wanted you to show them the liver chips.
Which one do you want to see?
No, yeah.
You want a lab coat on, Linda?
Great. It's liver on a chip. We're building three-dimensional liver on a chip. So there's a silicon chip in there, and it's in this little microfabricated reactor, some culture medium. If you want to see what it looks like on the microscope, it comes up on the computer screen, and so we can look at it.
This ensures that you could have a three-dimensional environment for these cells to grow in.
It's actually developed to test biological warfare agents. This is a silicon chip here, and there's three-dimensional liver tissue growing in each little square hole. Rats and mice are not little people, so if you want to test how agents behave in humans, it's better to do it on human tissue than it is to do it in rats and mice. And so what we're trying to do is develop better predictive models for how human tissue behaves in people. And to do that, we're growing three-dimensional liver in culture, and it happens that silicon is a great scaffold for liver.
A goal of mine is for people to work hard, ideally because they want to, but not because they have to. And I think a lot of the people that come here are very driven, but they're not driven by me, they're driven by themselves, that they want to do well, they want to make an impact on the world.
I think a lot about improving the everyday life of people and just the quality of health in the general population. You look for specific problems. Someone's dying of liver disease. Is there something we can do about this? So this is someone I can relate to and saving their life or preventing them from getting sick.
What this actually is there's live cells growing in here, and this is what Linda Griffith essentially has created into a liver chip. Eventually, you can take all of these chips and have a liver chip, a kidney chip, a heart chip, and put it together, and you have an entire human body chip, if you will, that you can use for drug screening, toxicology, or other pharmaceutical applications.
Particularly if you ask questions that are potentially can change a lot of things, you're going to get a lot of resistance and a lot of skepticism. Now, people are a little less skeptical just because of the successes we've had.
The atom, a particle so infinitely small that it takes over 100 billion atoms to make up the head of a pin.
Some of the problems we do, you kind of think at a molecular level. You think, how would I be if I were a molecule or a cell? And so you do think like that in some cases. For our laboratory, the general ideas are big ideas, ideas that I think can change the future. Most of these ideas are probably pretty complicated, but to solve them, we break them down into pieces, you know, and if we're able to solve some of those pieces, ultimately we can hopefully put together the puzzle.
Bob has an uncanny ability to see the practical side of science, to know what will actually play out as a clinical therapy, as a product, and so forth. I think a lot of his success comes from being able to just instantly sift through gazillions of ideas and just zoom in on ones that are ultimately going to play out to be successful.
Let's not even worry about it's impossible. That's what Bob teaches you to do. Forget that it's impossible technically, because technical issues can always be circumvented. Bob's also not a technologist, and he encourages people to be something more than technologists and more than engineers. He encourages people to be scientists.
To me, a good scientist is somebody that asks the right questions. Our whole life, as we're going through grammar school and high school and then college, we're finding answers to questions that other people have asked us. But the hallmark of great scientists are often what questions we ask. You know, that's not something that's taught in school. What you want to do is find good answers to extremely important questions. The promises of the biotechnology revolution are almost unlimited. I think they range from new drugs for all kinds of diseases to new tissues and organs to new diagnostics, ultimately to personalized medicine. I mean, I think that basically over the next 50 or 100 years it will transform the way we live. I think anything's possible. We just don't know how long it's going to take to make it possible.